will free myself from all you, yeah.
Everything that brought me alive, but we're all like monsters, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi. We took my innocence without an alibi. Everything that brought me alive, oh, we're all like monsters, playing with the monsters. They brought me alive, but got no alibi. It's a lover's fight without an alibi.
What's up? What's up? Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to the second Pest PHP meetup. And I'm super excited again to prepare this meetup for you all. And I'm seeing so many familiar faces on the chat. I think it's around the same people who were on the very first Pest PHP meetup, which was 1 month ago. I'm seeing Leandro, Alexandre, Ruslan, Roberto, so many familiar faces. Thank you so much for being close to the Past PHP community. And today we have an awesome meetup. But before we get started, just tell me on the chat if you can hear me, if my microphone is working as expected, of course, and if you can see the image correctly as well, of course. But I want to start by saying thank you to all the premium sponsors we have around the Pest community, talking about accounting, Mema, and Scout APM. Because of these companies, I'm actually able to explain to my wife why do I spend so many time on my computer after work. And yeah, it's because I have side projects. One of them is Pest, and it's super cool to have these companies supporting all my work and supporting the community. So today we have the same format as last week, which in my opinion is a great format. It's a format that I think for people who are just getting out of work and just want to make a pause, they can just have those two talks, quick talks around Pest, and is something. It's not boring. Is it has a tons of live coding. So I'm really happy with this format. And the first talk will be diving into the expectation API by Luke Downing. And of course, the expectation API have received tons of updates recently. And Luke is really one of those persons who have done amazing contributions to the expectation API. So I'm really glad that Luke will be able to show me and show us some of those improvements. So it's super cool. And the second talk is by Freak from Spassy, and he will be talking about using snapshots in Pest. And we all know Freak from the Laravel community, and Freak have done thousands of Laravel and PHP packages. So I'm really glad of having him today on the Pest meetup. And finally, we are going to have the after party, and today we are going to have a giveaway, which was something that I'm really excited about. Basically, Spassy offer us 3 free licenses of Ray, and we are going to give away those licenses today at the end of the meetup. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's new before we jump into the talks. And the first thing I'd like to show you is we just have crossed 500,000 downloads for a testing framework. And this is a pretty fantastic number if you think a little bit about it. Like, not everyone does testing. This is not a simple package. It's really a framework that people need to opt in and choose instead of using any other framework. So having 500,000 downloads in just 1 year, it's really something that I'm really proud of. And of course, this is also thanks to you all who are on that side supporting the work of the Pest team. And yeah, a really number I'm proud of. So yeah, thank you so much. The second thing I would like to talk about is that we now have a new company sponsoring Pest, and which is Spassy. Spassy is well known in the community for making packages and video courses and products around PHP and Laravel. And Spassy decided to join the premium company sponsoring Pest. So thank you so much, Spassy, for that. All right, so let's now jump into the talks. And the first talk is diving into the expectation API by Luke. And I'm going to just call Luke here to the stream. It's important to also to mention that Luke is the author of Past in Practice video series. But I think I'm going to let Luke speak a little bit about that. So hi, Luke. How are you, man?
And you know, good, thank you. How are you?
Super excited to have you here, man.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, hopefully today you will not have any technical issues, because you did had some issues in your last stream, right?
Indeed, yeah. Hopefully they're fixed and we're good to go today.
All right, man. So I'm gonna just quit the room here, and I'm gonna let you share your screen first of all, so I can just put your screen to everyone else. All right, there we go. So good luck your talk, and see you soon.
Thanks, Nuno. All right. So hopefully my microphone doesn't give up today and we'll be all good. I'm Luke. I'm a developer from the UK and I work mainly with Laravel. I've been working with Pest for, I don't know, about a year now, certainly with the Expectation API. And the reason I'm talking about the Expectation API is because I really do think it's the crux of Pest. It's the thing that drew me to it. And it's just so nice to use. Like when you're used to using this assert equals or whatever, and you first use the Expectation API, it's like a dream come true. So I want to share my love for the Expectation API with you today, hopefully show you some new things you've not seen before. And that might just light a little spark that makes you go and check Pest out, makes you go and try the Expectation API, and I promise you won't regret it. But I'm actually going to start by talking about collections, not about expectations. And if you don't know, collections are a class in Laravel that wrap arrays. And they let us do all sorts of like common functions that we would usually do with for loops and for each loops. So transforming arrays, mapping arrays, pulling, pushing, etc. And Adam Wathan, he wrote an amazing book called Refactoring to Collections, which really kind of opened my eyes to the world of collections. And there were 3 points that kind of stood out from his book. The first is that collections are visually consistent. So when you look through the code, you've not got to try and work out what that for loop is doing or why that temporary variable is there. It's all just methods. It looks right. It's so much easier to read, so much nicer to scroll through a class that uses collections instead of arrays. It's also open for extension, and by that I mean that each collection method usually returns a new collection instance, which allows you to build these chains of collections, and it allows you to perform small transformations on the original array until you get the result you're after. And finally, it's self-documenting. And what I mean by that is once you've taken the time to learn the collection API, when you come back to it 6 months down the line or a year down the line, or you switch to a different project that's using Laravel, you understand what's going on. You don't have to relearn anything. And Adam kind of made this quote in his book. There's something beautiful about taking some data, piping it through a series of discrete transformations, and having the solution come out on the other side. Now, why am I talking about collections in a talk about expectations? Well, because I believe that if we change just a couple of words in this sentence, all of a sudden we are referring to the Expectation API. And that is to say that there's something beautiful about taking a value, piping it through a series of discrete expectations, and having the result come out on the other side. And hopefully by the end of this talk, you'll agree with me that the beauty of collections is similar to the beauty of expectations. Now, when I asked you guys on Twitter what you wanted to hear, many of you said you wanted to listen to the Expectation API talk, but there are a lot of you, in fact, the majority, who want to see a PHP unit test case migrated to Pest. So I promise I've not ignored this tweet. I am, in fact, going to show you exactly how to do that today. And we're going to have a bit of a 50-50 split. So hopefully you enjoy the content. You're probably expecting some code, and you're in luck. The code starts now. All right. So in PHP Storm, I've gone ahead, created a bit of a dummy Laravel application, and it's quite basic. It has one action. And this action is a handle method that receives an array of data. Now, this array of data is validated using Laravel's validation methods. We then save the user to the database. We create an organization for the user, and you can see here that that user's organization name is just their full name with the word organization appended on the end. And then we're imagining that this application is like an online bookstore, right? So users sign in, they buy books, and they read them. But when they first register, we don't want them to have to wait or buy anything. We want to get them started straight away. So we're going to give them 3 books for free. But they're always the same 3 books. The first is Wind in the Willows, the second Oliver Twist, and the third Lord of the Rings, 3 classics. So they'll be good to go there. Now, I've already gone ahead and written a PHP unit test case for this action. So let's just have a quick look through it. You can see we're using the refresh database trait that comes with Laravel so that we can perform database tests. And we set up some valid data that we can reuse throughout this test. In our first test, we're just checking that a user can actually be created, that we can give it a first name, that the last name is as expected, the email works properly. And then we use Laravel's authentication system to make sure that that user has actually been saved and can be authenticated with. Our second test makes use of data providers in PHP unit. And we basically just check that if we pass in valid data, a validation exception gets thrown. In our third test, we're going to assert that the user receives their own organization. You'll notice that the organizations are a one-to-many relationship. So a user could belong to more than one organization. And we're just checking that the name is also accurate. The final test, perhaps the most complex one, we're checking that the books have been set up correctly. So first we check that they have 3 books. Then we loop through each of the books and check that each book is a book. And then finally, we go through each of the books individually and we check that the name, author, and number of pages in that book match our expectations. So let's start by converting these assertions to expectations. Start with this one here. And any expectation starts with the expectation global function. And what you pass to expect is the object you're interested in. This is perhaps the first thing that makes expectations better than assertions. The object that we're interested in testing is front and center rather than being tucked away at the end of the method. So how do we actually check the instance using expectations? Well, there's a handy method called toBeInstanceOf. We just pass the user class constant. And if I remove this and run this test, you'll see that it passes. Before we go any further, I just want to say we're still in PHP unit here, right? So you do not need to convert to Pest just to use the expectation API. You can start using the expectation API in your existing test cases today, and then you can slowly migrate to Pest when you feel ready to do so. Okay, let's carry on. Let's make the rest of these match the expectation API. So we're going to expect that the user's first name is Sam. The user's last name is Rowden. And the user's email is sam@downing.tech. Sam's a contributor to Pest, by the way, and is a good friend of mine. So that's why we're using him today. And finally, we have this assertion here, right? And we can use another expect with the logic inside of it to actually authenticate the user. We can just say to be true, chain that on the end. If you're wondering how you figure out which of these to use, well, head over to the Pest documentation. In expectations, available expectations, you can see everything available to you in the expectation API, such as my favorite, to match array, where you can check the value of an array or even an array subset when you're working, for instance, with API responses. It's so useful. Back to our test. This is cool, right? This is much nicer. All of our values are written at the start. The expectation API reads much nicer, in my opinion. But you'll notice that there's still quite a bit of boilerplate. We're having to repeat this call to expect 5 times. But in 4 of our 5 tests, we're making assertions on the same object, the user object. Well, in these cases, Pest actually turns it up to 11 by allowing us to make use of something called higher order expectations. Let me show how it works. I'm going to drop this onto another line just so we can be visually consistent. And then I'm going to come in and remove the expecting user calls, almost as if we're accessing the property on the user itself. I'll remove these wrappers too, and then I'll remove the semicolons till we get valid PHP syntax again. And I'm going to run this test. And you can see the test passes. Just so you know there's no trickery going on, I'll remove the W in Rowden. You'll see the test fails, and we even get the correct error message. This is higher order expectations, and it is mind-blowing. It's so fun to use. Anytime you're working with an object that has properties or methods, or an array, you can use higher order expectations to reach into the value and then perform assertions on whatever you've reached for. So in this case, we grab the first name, we check it's Sam. How clean is that? As soon as we've got rid of every instance of user apart from this one here, we can now inline this. And I'm going to make use of a little pest function called and, which I can chain onto the expectation call in order to remove this as well and allow us to convert this entire test to one beautiful expectation chain. If you're wondering what and does, it basically just news up a new expectation. Run this again, our test passes. How sweet is that? And remember, we're still in PHP unit. We've not converted to Pest yet to make use of this. Okay, our second test doesn't really have any expectations in it apart from this exception one, which we'll come back to later. So we're going to skip that for now. And we're going to play with this one. We're dealing with a collection here, as we mentioned earlier. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with my expectation. And let's grab the user's organizations. And remember, in this first instance, we're checking that the count is 1. So to have count 1. Now, if we're using higher order expectations from the get-go, we need to reach in and grab the first organization in the collection. So we can do that just as you would do if you were directly working with a collection using the first method. So higher order expectations aren't limited to properties. You can use methods as well. All right, so we'll grab the first, and we're going to say that that should be an instance of the organization class. That handles this line, so let's remove that. And then we want to check that the first organization's name equals Sam Rowden's organization. So we can grab the first expectation again, grab the name property from the first expectation. So you can reach in as deep as you want, and then we'll expect that to be Sam Rowden's organization. And let's delete this, run the test. You can see it passes. How awesome is that? You might be wondering, why do you need to call first twice? And to put it simply, anytime we perform an expectation method or a chain of expectation methods, such as if we chain to be on here, for example, the scope of the higher order expectation is going to be reset. So that's why we have to call first again. And that just means you can get out of all sorts of sticky situations without having to go back up the chain or anything silly like that. But we're only using this user variable once again, so why don't we remove this and inline it, and then get rid of this line and this line. Everything still passes, so we're good there. And let's move on to our final test, perhaps the most complex. We're going to try writing it using higher order expectations again, seeing as we're in love with those now. So let's grab user books, and first of all, we do that same basic check. It should have 3 books. That gets rid of this. Now note that we have a for each loop. If you were working with PHP unit and you were using assertions, you would have to break into a for each loop to do this kind of test. But with the expectation API, we can stay right in the flow by using the each method. Each method is going to take an iterable value that you've passed to expect, and any assertions that you add on top of this will be passed to each item in the iterable. So let me show you what I mean. We can say to be instance of, note by the way that I still get all my PHP Storm syntax highlighting. I still get code completion. So don't worry about that. Pest has amazing support for all of this. So I check that each one is an instance of a book class. And let's remove this, run the test. We still pass. How cool is that? No need to break it into a for loop. I hope you can see what I'm talking about when I compare collections to expectations. All right, what about this? This is more complicated because it kind of is a loop, but each item has different values. Well, Pest doesn't leave us there either. We can do the same thing with the sequence method. If we look at the documentation for the sequence method, you'll see that it receives a variadic number of callbacks. So let's add a callback. Function that receives the book, and we're just going to say that the book's name should be, and we'll grab this Wind in the Willows title here. Now, to explain how sequence works, I'm going to run the test and show that it fails. And you'll see that the failure message is that it expected Wind in the Willows, but it received Oliver Twist. I can fix that message by adding another sequence item and changing the value here to Oliver Twist. When I run this again, I'm going to get a different error message. This time, it expected Wind in the Willows, but the actual one was Lord of the rings. What's going on here? Well, the sequence is going to look at the index of the item you've passed in, and it's going to try to match it with the index of the iterable in the expect value. And then it will try to perform assertions on that iterable item. But if it runs out of callables before it runs out of items, it's going to loop back and start from the beginning. So we can fix this by simply adding another callable and dropping Lord of the Rings in there. And when we run the test, it's with flying colors. So let's go select all of these instances, and we'll use higher order expectations again to select the author. And we need to make sure that the author is a certain value, which we'll fill in a moment. And then we need to grab the number of pages. And in this case, I'm going to use 2=, which is basically a type ignoring version of 2b. And that's because Laravel will probably coerce this integer into a string in the database. And then let's just go fill these values out, right? So Charles Dickens is going to go here. Smith Graham is going to be dropped in here. Tolkien is going here. Let's remove all of this code with all of its boilerplate, run this test, and boom, we pass. You might be thinking, well, why don't you just chain sequence onto the end of that each? And that would be cool, wouldn't it? But when I run this test, you'll see it fails. Without diving too deep into how Pest works here, when you are inside an each, you're basically stuck there for the remainder of the expectation. So my advice is always end on an each. Don't start with it. We can easily resolve this by dropping the sequence before the each. And when we run this, the test now passes. And seeing as we're only using user here again, we can take this, we can drop it in here and remove the temporary variable, run the test, and it's passed. How cool is that? All of our tests now make use of the expectation API. For some reason, PHP Storm has decided to drop my setup method all the way down there. So let me come back and drop it here. So whilst we have converted to expectations and everything looks so good, it can get even better by converting fully to Pest. So if you've come to see how to convert PHP unit to Pest, this is the moment you can start listening. The easiest way to convert to Pest is just to remove everything to do with classes. So that's how we're going to start. Now I want you to take note that we use refresh database here. And if you use traits in your classes or you have some form of special test case, then you can set that up in the pest.php file. In this case, we're saying that whenever there is a class in the feature directory, it should use this particular test case, and we want the refresh database trait. Couldn't be simpler. Right. We've removed that. We can remove the namespace because we're not working with classes anymore. Let's remove that as well. And there's a function that Pest provides called before each. So we'll have a callable in there. And we'll grab this data, drop it into there, move that semicolon to the outside. And before each is basically the equivalent of setup in PHP unit. So anything you do in setup, usually, you're just doing before each instead. All right, here's a tip to convert all of your tests to Pest quickly. I'm going to highlight public function test and globally select everything. And then I'm going to replace all of those instances with one of Pest's test functions. In this case, it, because I like the it syntax more than test syntax. I'll open that function up and I'll start with a string. I'll then use my ID to jump to the end of the line and close the string. And as a second parameter, I'm going to pass a function. Now we already have braces thanks to our PHP unit tests. So I'm going to select all of the end braces and close the it function followed by a semicolon. The only break in syntax comes around this data provider here. So let's fix this test up now. First of all, Pest doesn't need dot blocks. So let's remove this data provider dot block. And while we're here, let's clean this test name up. Pest test names can be anything you can think of because it's just a string. So it must have valid data, for example. In the function, we're going to pass our invalid data property just as we would in PHP unit with data providers. And how do we use this function here? Well, we can use a method called with in Pest. And what do we give to with? Well, we just provide the exact same data we were going to provide in our data provider method. Right, I'm going to refactor my code using the IDE at this point, and you'll see everything kind of jumps into place nicely. If you're wondering, well, what do I do if I want to use my data providers with multiple tests? Don't worry. If you go to the Pest documentation, down to data sets, there's shared data sets, and you can use your data across as many tests and test cases as you'd like. So that's already handled for you. All right. Now that we're in proper Pest syntax, let's use the console Pest runner to make sure everything passes. It doesn't, so let's come back. I've left a brace in there. Run it again. All of our tests are passing. That's great. So already we have converted to Pest. But if we add a little bit of extra sugar on top, everything becomes even sweeter. So let's do that. Let's rename our first test from it can create a user with underscores to it can create a user in beautiful English. And we're going to remove the second parameter, function, and just replace it by closing the it function. And you might think, what on earth are you doing? You've broken your test, and indeed I have, but not for long. We're going to make expect a chained method call onto it, and we're going to remove this unnecessary syntax at the bottom. What we have just created is a higher order test, not a higher order expectation, but a higher order test. This allows us to create these gorgeous chains of code where our test just becomes this fluent syntax. It's so nice to work with. Now, when we actually run this, the test will fail. And the error will be using this when not in object context. So what's going on here? Well, again, this isn't a deep dive into Pest itself, but basically Pest has two stages. The first you can think of as a compile time or a build time. And that's where Pest takes all of this code and runs it ready to pass to PHP unit. In the second stage, it's going to build a test case and run it through PHP unit, which is when your actual test gets run. So during that first stage, we don't have access to the test case, which is what this piece of code here is doing. To get around this, we can pass a callable to a higher order test expect method. Notice here we're using Laravel's facades, which require the test case to have been set up too. So I'll do the same thing here. I'll pass a callable. And if I run this test again, it passes. How neat is that? All right, next test. We already did a lot of work here to convert this to Pest, but we can make it just a little bit better. I never liked in PHP unit how I had to put the expect exception at the top of my test. All of my other assertions take place at the bottom of the test. So why should I look at the top for an exception? With Pest, this is handled for you. You can simply chain on the throws method and pass in a validation exception class, which is what we're testing for. That allows us to remove this line completely. And if we run this test, it passes. All 6 tests in the data set are passing. Seeing as this is a one-liner, it would be cool to convert it to PHP 7.4's arrow syntax. So do that now. And that will allow us just to clean up these method calls a bit and refactor using our IDE. Okay, what else have I done wrong? Looks like I've got just maybe a missing bracket going on. Happy days. All right, so we're fully passed and all 6 tests pass. How much nicer is that? Again, these beautiful chains. This is what Pest allows you to do. So nice to work with. This test here is very similar to the first one when it comes to converting it to a higher order test. So we can just say it creates an organization for the user. Remember how I said to do it? We take the second parameter, we just remove it completely, make expect chainable, turn the value of expect to a callable so that it can access the test case, remove this syntax at the bottom, reformat, and pass. And the same with our last test, I guess. So it gives the user 3 books. Same process, we remove the function, make expect a chained method, make sure that this is a callable so that Pest can access the test case, remove the syntax at the bottom, reformat, and run. And all of our tests are passing. Let's go back to our console, run it again, and you can see all the tests pass with flying colors. And just look at those names as well. Those test names are so much nicer than what you get in PHP unit. I'm just going to zoom out for a second so you can see what we've created. Just look how nice this syntax is. Like, everything sings. It's not just code. It's readable. It's almost like reading a book. Let me compare it with the original. Zoom out again. All of this rubbish here is gone. We don't need to do any setup method. We don't make calls to the parent. We don't have to have namespaces and worry about that. And our composer JSON. We don't have to use underscores or camel case for our test names. We don't have to have all this boilerplate around assertions because expectations do all of that for us. We don't have to have doc blocks that get in the way. We don't have to have separate functions if we're only using our data providers for a single test. And then look at this last test. Like, compare this last test and tell me that that is not one of the nicest things you've ever seen. All the code goes away. The only thing left is the actual test itself. So nice. So that's the expectation API. That is everything you need to know to get started using expectations in your code today, whether you're going to use Pest in full or whether you want to stick to PHP unit just a little bit longer. And I'll just end by saying that if you enjoyed what you heard today, you want to see more Pest in projects, come join me for Pest in Practice. We stream every Wednesday, apart from this Wednesday, because it's the Pest Meetup. And yeah, we're going to do some really cool stuff on there. We're currently converting opendoor.me, which is a live site, to Pest. And we're doing that with Tom, the creator of opendoor.me. You'll probably know him. He's big in the Laravel community. And you can reach me on Twitter if you want to be reminded about all of that at LukeDowning19. Check out my blog, which I update very rarely. So sorry about that, at downing.tech. And I just want to say thank you. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for spending your evening listening to what I have to say. And thanks, Nuno, for inviting me on the stream.
Whoa. Congratulations, man. Your talk was fantastic. I didn't expect less from the guy who have improved that much the expectation API, because that's the reality, right? Once you have joined kind of the core team of Pest, you have made fantastic contributions. And today you show them all on this meetup. We got to see the sequence method, the each method, all the I-worded, complicated yet fantastic stuff. So thank you so much, Luke, for showing me all of that.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me, Nuno.
So yeah, so just stay on the backstage, or if you want to just quit the room. But for the after party, I'm going to just invite you again so you can join us a little bit for a chat. All right?
Sounds great.
All right. See you in a second. Yeah, I know, guys. This talk was really fantastic. Luke is a great guy, you know. He really shares the vibe around Pest. He liked to see all the auto magic stuff that I like to see when I'm writing some tests. He really appreciate having clean code on his tests as well. And yeah, I'm really glad that Luke is very close to this community. But yeah, without no further ado, let's move now to the second talk of the day, which is using snapshots in Pest. And for this talk, we have Freak Moors, which is one of the big members of the Laravel community. Hi, Freak.
Hey, Nuno.
Thank you so much for coming, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Glad to speak at the meetup. So I'm very glad that you're doing a Pest meetup. It's a great idea.
Thank you. And I'm glad that you have created the original snapshot testing plugin for PHP unit that we now have ported to Pest. So I'm glad to see you finally in action on this meetup.
Cool. Yeah, I'm enthusiastic to tell you, all about it. It's actually a very simple thing. And if I'm honest, I am very intimidated by Luke's talk because he seemed very prepared and I'm kind of unprepared. I got some slides, but that's really all. So I didn't do a test run, so we'll see what happens.
I'm pretty sure you will deliver a good talk as well. So yeah, I'm going to leave the room so you can share your screen. So I can just put your screen on right here.
It should already be shared there. Yeah,
yep.
There we go. Woo,
all right.
Nuno's all the way down.
Good luck. Bye.
Right. Thanks, man. Okay, so I've prepared some slides here, and I'm a little bit nervous because, like I said, I didn't prepare too much, and I got my second COVID vaccine yesterday. And like most people that got their second vaccine of the type that I had, I'm a little bit under the weather. So I hope that everything goes well. But if you're not vaccinated yet, get yourself vaccinated. That's a good idea, I think. So I'm Freek. I'm a developer at a Belgian company called Spatie. I have a blog, freek.dev, where I talk about Laravel, PHP, JavaScript, web development related subjects. My company releases a lot of paid products, which you can see on our company website. We've also created Flare, which is an exception tracker for Laravel applications, but you can also use it for PHP or JavaScript applications. And I've also created an uptime monitoring service called Odir. And this one doesn't only monitor your homepage, but it will actually crawl your entire website and it will notify you when any of the pages of your site goes down. Now, before I head into the wonderful world of snapshots, I want to say a few words about our open source efforts. Nuno said that, I've created 1,000 packages. That is a big lie. Together with my team, I only created about 300, which is quite nice if you know that Spatie is only a team that consists of now 11 people. Most of these packages are PHP and Laravel. They've been downloaded now for 160 million times in total. And they are being downloaded 8 million times a month, which is quite amazing. Again, for a small team as ours. And I really hope that Pest will reach those numbers too one day. Those packages, they are not entirely free. There is a special license on them called postcardware, which means that if one of our packages makes it into your production, or I'm going to make this up now, or your testing environment, you need to send us a postcard, and you'll find the address on our company website together with pictures of every postcard that we have gotten until now. And I'm missing a lot of postcards. We only got a couple of, I think if I would estimate 200, 300, maybe a little bit more than that, but not 160 million. So I'm missing quite a few. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk a little bit about snapshot testing. And I'm going to assume that most of you haven't heard about this at all. So let's first theoretically say what it is, and I'll show you in practice in a few moments. So what is a snapshot? A snapshot, it sounds a little bit heavy, but it is just a file on disk, which we call a snapshot. And your test succeeds if the output of your test matches what is inside the snapshot. And if it does not match the content in the snapshot, then your test will fail. It's really simple, but you'll feel and see it in a few moments. Now, you might wonder where this came from. Did Spatie invent this? And we didn't invent this. This is a practice that has been here for nearly 30, 40 years. And the old name is characterization testing. This style of testing was popularized by Facebook. They included it in their tool called Jest that you probably all know. And they use it for testing interfaces. Because if you're testing an interface, you have like this big chunk of HTML, and you don't want to make assertions like how long is it, or is that piece of content there? No, you want to test like, is this piece of HTML exactly what I expect? How can we do this in PHP? Well, our company created 2 packages. The first one is the PHP unit snapshot assertions, where the core logic of snapshot assertions live. And Nuno helped us create the Pest plugin that brings the magic of snapshots to Pest. And it brings these wonderful moments, assert matches snapshots, and a few others. We have JSON snapshots, XML snapshots, and nowadays I think 8 types of snapshots, but they all do kind of the same thing. And you just use JSON and XML if you want a little bit nicer output. If your test fails, then it performs like a JSON diff of what you're expecting and what you actually have. Okay, I've already talked a lot, but let's just show it to you. So I have here, I hopefully open in PHP Storm, a project called Shiki. It's something that our team has been working on the past week. And before heading into the test, let's maybe just show what this does. So I'm going to github.com spatie shiki.php, and let's take a few moments to see what this package does. And you can see that Shiki is a beautiful syntax highlighter powered by the same language engine that many code editors use. So it can highlight code. So how it works is you give it a piece of code, you say which language is this, you say which theme it is, and then it will highlight your code. Let's see a few examples of that. And I'm currently using Shiki on my own blog. And let's take a look. Here's that hello world thing, which is perfectly highlighted. Oh, and I should also say, how does that highlighting work? Let's go and inspect this. You can see that it applies some color classes onto the HTML. It adds a line there. And you see you don't need any CSS. Shiki will add those colors for you. And the amazing thing about Shiki compared to something like highlight.js is that Shiki works with modern syntax as well. So here this is a little bit of a meta example where we highlight the source code of our Shiki package. And you can see that we use some PHP 8 properties here, which are perfectly highlighted. Very nice. It can also highlight blade syntax very well, which is a thing that other highlighters can't, or in many cases not do properly. And of course, it can also highlight something like Vue. Here's like a good example of that. A little bit of a Vue old style code. And it can basically highlight hundreds of types of languages. And you can use any VS Code theme that you want in this parameter. If you're downloading a theme from, I think it's called VS Code. VS Code themes. Didn't I put the link here? Yeah. If you download one of the themes that are mentioned, then you can just add the path here and you'll use that theme. So it's a pretty powerful highlighter. Now, why did I pick this package to show off testing snapshots? It's because this package actually produces chunks of HTML, which we need to test if they are correct. So what are we going to do? And this is a little bit of an old style of test where we don't use snapshots at all. We have some piece of code that we want to highlight using Shiki. And then we want to expect that this HTML comes out. Now you might think, you could assert like maybe is there a pre-class with Shiki is that color, right? But you don't want to make all these assertions separately. You want to make an assertion on the full block of HTML. So that's why we need it here. But having this block of HTML here is, it makes your test kind of ugly, I think. And it's also a little bit unmaintainable because, it's a lot of HTML, and you basically don't want to have this in your code. Now let's convert this code to snapshot testing, and it's actually a pretty simple process. So we don't need this at all. The expected HTML can go away. We don't need this assertion, and we can use a function that is provided by the snapshot package. And if you take a look at PHP, at the composer.json file, then you can see that we already installed it. And it brings us a function called assert matches snapshot. And let's import it to make it a little bit more clean. And what we are going to do is we are going to pass the actual result in that. Now I deleted this line of code. I need this back. And no, I'm going to call this output or whatever. Or maybe HTML or highlighted HTML, because that's what's in there. That's like a good name. And then we put it in assert matches snapshots. Okay, let's see and take a look what happens if we now run our test. So we are going to run our test, and you can see that we get a warning here. It can highlight PHP. And what does it say? Snapshot created for this test. Now let's go to our file system, and you can see that there's a new directory created here, snapshots. And all of your snapshots, they live in here. And here you can see that the file was created here using the name of the test. Let's take a look what's inside this. And you can see here that the output of the HTML lives in here. So this is pretty nice. I didn't have to add this to the test class itself. I just ran the test the first time and I got the output here. Now, the second time that I run this, then the test will pass, because what is being produced here, it actually matches what is inside the file. So our test is good. And I'm using one test here, but you can have as many tests as you like that use snapshots. They will all get their like unique named file in the snapshots directory. Now let's see what happens if something of your output changes. So let's maybe go to this function here and maybe add something new output, something like that, or maybe change, because this is our change. And let's just run that test again. And you can see that the test now fails, because what we return here doesn't match what is in the snapshot. You can see here that there's something changed here. Now, this makes tests a little bit brittle, because if you kind of expected that something had changed, then all of your snapshot tests will fail. And then you need to verify, like, is this like the new change that I want to put in my snapshots? And yeah, when something changes, you need to manually verify, is that change correctly? Now, let's assume that this change is actually correct. What you can do then is you could just remove the snapshot and run the test again, so that the first time the snapshot will be created. Or what you can also do is update the snapshots, which you can do with passing the flag D, which is unfortunately necessary to add a custom option to the command. And let's run this, update snapshots. And here you can see that for this test, the snapshot was now updated. If I take a look again at this snapshot, then you can see that the change was written in the snapshot. If I run this again without updating, then you see that the test passes. Let's go through the cycle one more time. So I'm going to remove that change because it wasn't really necessary. We are going to run Pest again. You can see that it failed. So, and I see here that change was removed, so that's good. So let's update the snapshots again. You can see that it was updated, and the next time I run it, then we get green here. So that's basically, yeah, all that you need to know about snapshot testing. Now for Pest, we also support the expectation API. So what you can also do is, instead of cert matching snapshots, you can do expect, then the output to match snapshot. Beautiful. Let's do this away. And you can see, if I run this again, that the test passes as well. So yeah, I've only used one test here, but if I just now this, and if I go to the main branch, then you see the actual test suite that we're using. And here you can see that we use a lot of snapshots. So we can just try some blade. We are going to highlight it. We're going to search that it messages snapshots. And yeah, we can use all test cases here. And we don't need to put all of the HTML inside the test, because the output of the HTML lives in those snapshots. And let me prove to you that it really works. If you run Pest, that it generates all of those snapshots again. So we have nothing in our snapshot directory again. Let's run Pest. Takes a little while because Shiki is not that fast. Snapshots were created, and the next time, then everything should match the snapshot. If I refresh this, yeah, then you can see that all of the files are here back again. So that is snapshot testing. I've used it now for HTML output, but where you can also use this for is for like API responses. If you have like, if you're creating an API yourself and you want to exactly know, like, did I get this output? And you have like hundreds of fields that you need to validate. You could validate them all 100 separately, or you could just have like the output of your API and write it in a snapshot and use it that way to verify if everything is correctly. Okay, that is the demo. Let's go back to the slides here. So let's start wrapping a little bit up. So I want to specify the advantages and disadvantages of snapshot testing. So you're surely going to get it. So the advantages of snapshot is that it's very easy to get started with. You saw me, using this in less than a minute. It can be used to validate complex output like HTML or XML or API, JSON, every kind of big response. And it's easily to update all the tests in one go. Now, a disadvantage is that it's a little bit brittle, because if there is any small change in the output that maybe isn't related to what you're testing, then your test will fail and you need to verify the response. It can be hard to pinpoint the exact point of failure in big responses. And if you're a little bit uncareful, then you can even write bugs in snapshots by just rewriting and don't noticing that there is a bug in there. So it's a little bit of a pro and cons there. So if you want to start with snapshot testing, it's very easy. Just use one of our packages. And if you want to know more, a little bit of theory about snapshot testing, go over to the Jest Docs. There's an excellent chapter on snapshot testing in there. Now there's one more thing that I want to share with you, and you are the first that I'm sharing this with. We are going to share this a little bit more publicly next week, but you that are watching get the scoop here. We are preparing another premium video course with Spatie, and this video course will be called Testing Laravel. And it's basically the best course to get started with testing, because at the start of the course, we assume that you don't know anything about testing at all. So we are going to start from the basics. But we're not going to stay with the basics. After the basics, then we are going to show you how we test our apps at Spatie. So it's a little bit opinionated, but you see a lot of cool subjects like snapshots, which I just shared with you, how we test APIs, how we handle pragmatic mocks, and much more. We show you everything that we learned by programming our real-world applications. And now here's the big thing, I think. When you purchase Testing Laravel, you basically get 2 courses in one, because we are going to record the entire course 2 times. We are going to have a flavor Pest, and we are going to have a flavor PHP unit. And in the Pest flavor, we just start using Pest, and we imagine that PHP unit just doesn't exist. It's just you want to use Pest. Let's not talk about PHP unit, but just focus on Pest. And we also have PHP unit. And I think this is pretty good, because I think there are a lot of people that want to stick to PHP unit until a big player starts using Pest. But people that already are on the Pest train, they can use this. And we have a page on our company website. Let me show it to you. It's something pretty simple. Spatie.be testing Laravel, where you can leave us your email so we can inform you about when this test course launches. And we also share a few updates. And here you can also see the plans that I've just just said. We're already busy with creating this course. It's well underway, and we think we only need a month or so to finish this course. And it's a little bit my hope that this course can give Pest another little push so that more people start using Pest. Because if you take a look at the Pest PHP homepage, there's like a quote here somewhere, and I still stick by it. I wouldn't be surprised if Pest becomes the test default runner for PHP in the near future. And I still believe that. Okay, let's go to the slides one more time to finish off by saying thank you. If you want to be informed about the testing course, just subscribe on our website. Do take a look at our other products and courses as well. We also have a lot of open source. And yeah, if you want to stay informed about the things that I learn about web dev, read my blog, freek.dev. And that is basically all that I have for you today. Thanks for listening. And I hope Nuno is still here.
Of course I'm here.
Okay.
Thank you for your talk. It was fantastic. And
Thanks, man.
I'm really a fan of snapshot testing, you know. And I first started using snapshot testing with your package for PHP unit. That was months ago, of course. And I got really surprised by how easy it is to just assert that things don't change. And I do have some questions around this for you, but I'm going to save them for the after party, which is just about to start. It will not last long, the after party, because we are already crossed 1 hour on the meetup. But I'm going to just pull Luke here, which is also here ready for some discussions. In the chat, please do not hesitate on making some questions. We are going to stay for a couple of minutes. So if you have some questions for those amazing speakers, do not hesitate. Now, before you going there, let me announce that we already have the third Pest meetup scheduled for August. And the first speaker will be Mateus Guimarães, which is the author of 30 Days Laravel, and also have done fantastic content around testing on Laravel and on PHP. So Mateus Guimarães will give us all his insights about testing in Pest next month. The date is to be determined, and also the second speaker is not yet decided. But I mean, do not forget that if you would like to give your first talk and you are on the chat, you can also participate on these Pest meetups. So if you just would like to just make your first talk, or if you are already a speaker, you can just talk with me on Twitter and propose me a topic, and maybe you can be one of the Pest meetup speakers in the future. Now, let's do our first giveaway. Now, this is the first time that this ever happens on Pest meetups, and obviously because we just had 2 Pest meetups. Yet, super thank you for Spasi for making this giveaway on this meetup number 2, which is a Ray giveaway. And you know what, Freek, do you like us to make 1 minute introduction
Yeah, sure.
about Ray?
Sure. Should I do it, or are you going to do it?
Please, go ahead.
Okay. So Ray is a tool that we launched earlier this year. And it is really for people that really like dump-driven development. Now, there are, I think, 2 ways of testing PHP. You have like xdebug, and you have like people that do like little dump statements. There are quite a few downsides on the dump statements, like they mess up the output. You don't know where is this dump statement come from. If you do dump statements in a lot of files, then it's harder to track down when your test or bug has been fixed. Like, where are my dump statements? You don't want to leave that when you deploy to production. And Ray is a tool that solves all that. If you use Ray, then you can just have like a little function called Ray, and you can send anything that you want to a desktop application. And in that desktop application, we just format everything the way you like it. If you send like a string to there, yeah, there's nothing we do there. It's just a string. If you do like an array there, then you can collapse it all. If you send like a mailable, we'll render the mail so you can see the mail. You can even pause your code. That is something that was suggested to me by you, Nuno, I think. And yeah, it's basically a very handy testing helper. I think there are like two kinds of people that are now using Ray: the ones that were immediately convinced, and the ones that say, "Nah, this isn't something for me." And after a week, they are completely convinced. So I'm pretty sure that there's a big chance that if you don't know Ray yet, just give it a shot. There's a free demo version that you can download on our website.
Nice. And as you can see, I'm already a Ray user. So this is a software that costs $50. But because Pasi is so nice to the Pest community, we just have made a giveaway of 3 free licenses. And those are the Twitter handlers that retweeted the Pest Meetup tweet this morning. And because of that, they just have won free licenses of Ray. So if you are one of those folks here, just send me a direct message on Twitter, and I'm going to give you the free Ray license, thanks to Spasi.
Perfect.
Yeah, and now the after party. And I did save some questions before we go to the chat. Just have prepared some questions that come to me during your talks. And the first one is really for Luke. And Luke, I saw that you are really passionate around the expectation API and around high order testing and higher order expectations and all those complicated words. So I wanted to ask you, when for you is the limit of combining high order tests with high order expectations? So when simple is too much simple, in your opinion?
Yeah, so obviously in expectations, you can chain assertions. You can have like 2B, 2 equal, to have down, and you can chain them all one after the other. And in PHP Storm, there's like a line on the right of the editor that is like the 120 character limit, I think it is. Or that might be the length of a tweet, but one or the other anyway. And usually if the expectation methods reach that line, then I usually think, well, that's too far gone. So at that point, I'd probably simplify down or break it up into multiple expectation calls.
Interesting. So you use the limit around 120 characters that PHP Storm gives you. That's nice. I was about to say that in my own Pest tests, I usually combine high order tests with high order expectations if I'm simply when I'm just testing one level nested. Not sure if this is clear, but when I'm testing, for example, user companies to be 1 or username to be not empty, if I need, for example, to go 2 levels down, for example, user, company, owner, and then whatever, that's already too much. And when that happens, I usually break things down to make it a little bit more clear to the eye, let's say.
It tends to be indication as well that there should be a second test in there usually, right? So,
that's a good point. That's a good point.
Not necessarily that you can't use. Yeah. You usually can still use higher order tests with higher order expectations. You just need 2 tests instead of 1, like 1 giant test.
That's a very good point, because with higher order expectations, you can just make the mistake of testing multiple things at once, right?
And
or in the same lines.
Yeah, and like, I think this sounds stupid when you say it out loud, but like your fingers get bored of typing underscores with PHP unit test names. So often you try to cram as much of the test logic into a single test as you can. And then you're like, oh, I don't have to write another test name at least. But as soon as you can just touch type the test names and you don't have to think about the underscore or anything like that, it kind of becomes a lot easier to have lots of small tests rather than giant single tests.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation. If I might add something as well, Mostly when I use Pest, I want to have like one style of testing inside of a file. So it's also when you have like a test file where there are lots of like advanced longer tests, I tend to do the smaller tests also like not with like higher order things, just to make everything more the same.
You mean for visual consistency? You
Just for
think
visual,
that?
yeah, it's just a visual thing. Yeah.
Interesting. Reminds me a topic a few weeks ago where people didn't like the fact that, for example, one method has types and the other doesn't have any type. It doesn't make things visual consistent, let's say. And in testing is the same thing. I kind of agree with you when you see like one test with high order expectations, like everything without a closure, basically, and then you see a test just below with a closure can make things a little bit inconsistent. So I do tend to agree with you that probably one style per file make things a little bit nicer as well.
Yeah, for me that works. And yeah, we also discussed this a little bit before the meetup. I think your mood also has an influence on this.
Like if you are with a little bit with a beer, you probably just go all the way down and you don't
Yeah,
care.
yeah. Just give all the magic stuff. This is cool. Let's do it. You're enthusiastic about all of this.
And also about making things simpler, and now about snapshot testing, which is the talk of Freak today, which is definitely make things simpler. We got the chance of seeing on Freak his talk a test before snapshot testing and a test after snapshot testing. And I remember when I was first getting started with snapshot testing, I was like, "Whoa! I just discovered something fantastic! I'm going to just use snapshot testing everywhere." Like every single assertion will be snapshot testing starting today. So I wanted to ask you, Freak, because I know that Spassy does big projects, and if you already have problems before by the fact that testing suite contains a lot of snapshots.
Yeah, there are certainly some difficulties there. Like for instance, if you have like output that generates UIDs, something like that, something that changes all the time, or a timestamp or something that changes all the times. Those are things that you must solve. And one of the things that I haven't shown you yet, because I want to keep my talk very simple, is that sometimes we do like a little bit string replace before we write something to the output. We have some methods like remove all UIDs, just replace them with the word fake UID and then put it in a snapshot. So that's certainly something to be aware of, and it's on the list of things that maybe make it a little bit easier in the package as well. That there's some way to just remove UIDs very very easily. Have to think about that.
It's funny that what you just mentioned also goes in the line of what Mariano Goldman, which is an attendee of the meetup, said on the chat, which is, Freak, there is a way of ignoring or whitelisting parts of the snapshot. Just like you just have said, timestamps, IDs, UIDs, stuff that usually change when you run your test suite.
Yeah, right now there isn't. It's just up to you to just make the replacements before you write something to a snapshot. Something I'm thinking now out of just out top of my head is maybe we should have like assert matches snapshot : before you give it a closure, and we'll run that closure before everything gets written to a snapshot. So you can just make the replacements via the closure, so you don't need to replicate it inside of the other test. That might be like a nice thing for us to add. Right now there isn't like an ignore or whitelist. It's very very simple.
You mean like assert matches snapshot, and then that will create a pending assertion which you can pass before, that will kind of filter the content of the HTML before creating the snapshot? Nice. That sounds like a very good idea.
And I think if we make like that thing static, that it just gets run before any snapshot in your entire test suite, then you only have to define those whitelist or replacers just once. That might be pretty cool.
Yeah,
I'll,
I do
I'll
see myself using that for sure.
Yeah, I'll see if I can come up with a little bit of time between recording Pest videos to add that to the package.
Yeah, I am definitely excited for your video course, by the way. I think there is, I already told you this, there is definitely a market for that. I do get messages all the time of people asking me when you do a test video series. And I feel like it's exactly what you just mentioned. Like people don't want to see what are the difference between Pest and PHP unit. People really want to see how can I get started with testing
Yeah,
using Pest.
indeed.
And that's it. I don't
Yeah.
want to see stuff around PHP unit. I just want to see how do I start with Pest, period.
Yeah.
So super excited to see your course around that.
Yeah, and to drive the Pest adoption a little bit more, we'll also do like a couple of videos on how to convert the test suite, and we'll make those free because I think those should be free for people that already know testing to just give Pest a little bit of a boost, much like the live streams that Luke is doing that also help to get Pest in new places.
Luke is a natural speaker, don't you think? Like a natural public speaker, let's say.
We need to have him at the next Laracon, I think.
Yeah, there is definitely potential. Like he definitely has potential for that. It's I mean, the way he delivers the content, it's really fantastic. So,
and it started on the Pest Meetup, the whole talking career.
And we do have a question from the chat for Luke, which is, definitely we saw during your talk, like you were applying some shortcuts on the PHP Storm, just refactoring things and to just migrate to Pest. So a question from Harry is, does the expectation API work when you are refactoring PHP Storm? So if I rename a property on the model, for example, do I also get that change on the test?
So if you are using higher order expectations and you're diving deep into the higher order expectation, then currently, no. I do believe Oliver, who is the maintainer behind the PHP Storm plugin for Pest, is hard at work trying to, catch all of the side points. But every time he gets somewhere, we go and add some new complexity to the expectation API. But I'm sure that he will work hard and it will be there at some point. But at the minute, you would just need to look at the break-in tests and go and change that property manually.
Right.
I mean,
if you are not using high order expectations, you will get the refactoring expected, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you did like expect and then inside the brackets user organizations, obviously, if you refactor that, it will change. But if you were to say expect user and then chain organizations onto the end of that, that's where at the moment the IDE wouldn't be able to pick that up.
Yeah, definitely like having a good PHP Storm plugin is very important. In Oliver, which is one of the maintainers of Pest, he is doing a fantastic work updating the plugin for PHP Storm. Even yesterday, he just hyped me something on Telegram that probably he would like to make his own tweet about that. But he basically just showed me something, which is you can extend the expectation API already, and you can add auto-completion from the extensions that you had to the expectation API. A little bit similar to Laravel macros. You can add a macro to the expectation API and you will get auto-completion on the PHP Storm, thanks to Oliver's work. But he's about to ship that. And definitely it's not easy for him. Like we ship magic stuff every week and he just has to keep up. And sometimes it's definitely not easy for tools to static analyze all of this magic stuff.
Okay.
And I've got a message that Luke from Adrian, that Luke is your salesman. So we need to leverage that in the future for sure. All right. We are 1 hour and 20 minutes, which is a little bit over the 1 hour that we had expected. I wanted to say thank you to our speakers for preparing these talks and to deliver these talks to everyone. So thank you, Freak, and thank you, Luke.
My pleasure.
And thank you also all the attendees to the meetup who have spent all the time here in the chat talking with us. And thank you so much to all of you guys, because it's thanks to you that we have this meetup. So yeah, see you all next month for the meetup number 3 with Mateus Guimarães and other speaker, which is yet to be determined. So yeah, goodbye everyone.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right.
I will free myself from